Hey guys, welcome to the weekly focus. So I have two pairs I'm looking for buying opportunities, so potential buying opportunities, and I have two pairs I'm looking for potential selling opportunities. But before we look at these pairs, let's have a look at the trade recap. So last week, we'll start with gold. I had a selling opportunity on gold and I had another opportunity on BTC, and you can watch the previous week's market focus so you understand why I took these sells. So looking at gold, this was May 21st and this was a setup I was looking at. So I was looking for a sell opportunity on this pair, and you can see clearly the price was actually moving to the upside, and most people will not take these sells, but there's a setup I'm focusing on, or there's a setup we look at, and that was what gave me the go ahead to take the selling opportunity. So once I got in on this sell opportunity on gold, the only thing I had to do was to manage the position. So at this point, once price started moving to the downside, I had my stop loss move to break even, and this was on the 22nd, and then I had to secure some profit as price kept moving to the downside. So at this point we secured say 1.12%. we kept securing, so I kept moving my stop loss, and at this point we had say 1.54% secured already, and at this point we had 2.45% secured. So eventually price stopped me out, so we had a reversal in price, and price took me out on this gold position at say plus 2.45%. so that's what we made from this one, plus 2.45%. I will show you the BTC one too real quick. We got in on the BTC trade also. This was on the 22nd, so right here. So you see the same opportunity I was looking for, a selling opportunity on BTC. So price moves to the upside, there's a setup we're looking at. I took the sell position here. That was on the 22nd, and then on the 23rd, so this was on the 22nd, I took the sell opportunity. On the 23rd, we had to manage the trade now, so I moved my stop loss to break even once price moved accordingly, and then at this point I had to secure say 0.6% already, and eventually this didn't play out compared to the gold position, so we had some difficulty for price to move to the downside, and we had a reversal. But because I had my stop loss securing 0.6%, that was okay for me, so I'll take that and then I'll look for re-entry. So let's look at what we have for this week. I'll do this real quick. All right, so looking at what we have for this week, the first thing we look at is the DXY, and just having an overlook of the DXY for multiple time frames. If you use multiple time frames for your analysis, you can see a lot happening on the DXY already, but I'll just break it down for you. So I'll start with the daily time frame first of all. So on the daily time frame, I like using psych numbers and I like using trend lines. So the first thing you can see on the daily time frame is this area where price consolidated. We had a drop from 106, which is this point. I'll just make this bigger. So we had a drop from 106, which is this area, to 105. Price hesitated at this point, putting this move to the upside, but eventually we had a move to the downside. So if you're looking at it from the daily time frame, there's certain possibilities, or there's certain things that could happen already. And the first one is, with price sitting at this point of say, price is currently sitting at 105, and this is a principle I use all the time, and if you've been watching my previous videos you can tell already. I like using psych numbers because once price respects a psych number, it's very powerful and you see the move very smooth, like there's no complication at that point. So looking at it from the daily time frame, with these buyers coming in, so we've had these buyers coming in, and there's a reaction from this point of 105. So there's a high possibility that the sellers that's causing this reaction at this point could drop prices to the downside to test say 104. Now this is going to take a lot of time for it to play out because we're looking at the daily time frame, and the reason I say it's going to take a lot of time, it's very easy for you to tell. So see like the move that is coming to the upside. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've had 6 days for prices to move to the upside. So there's a high possibility we might have, say, 1, 2, and you see prices coming to the downside just to test areas like this of 104. And that's a possibility coming into next week. So that's the long-term view for me on the DXY. So coming into next week, there's a high possibility but we could see sellers taking prices to 104, and that's simply because of this rejection that is happening on 105. If price finds it difficult to go past one psychological number, then there's a high possibility the price navigates towards the next psychological number. So if this psychological number of 105 proves to be a difficult point for the DXY to go past, and then it's most likely for the DXY to move down to, say, 104. Now this is going to take time for it to happen, and again it might come in, say, with a single candle looking at this one. So at this point we had prices moving to the upside, and that's why you had this daily candles being very impulsive. So when you look at this one right here, when you look at the sells, you have very impulsive sell candles coming in, and the buys are very corrective. So it's taking more days for the corrections to come in, and then it's taking lesser days for the sellers to move prices to the downside. But just going off of the side numbers as of now, which is what is happening here, we have a rejection at 105. We should expect prices to move to 104. But how do we confirm this rejection at 105? Because price has just gotten to 105, and there's a possibility it could do this. So there's a possibility price could still move past 105. So when you move to lower time frames, you start looking for possibilities, or you start looking for clues as to how this rejection at 105 is actually playing out. So we step down to the 8-hour time frame real quick just to see what's happening. So on the 8-hour time frame, if you look at how price has been moving, it's giving you higher highs and higher lows. It's not really visible on the 8-hour time frame, but you have a high, you have a low, there is a high, there is a low, there's a high, there is a low, and there is a high, and there is a pullback giving you this low. So there's still this possibility for prices to move past this point. So in as much as we saw that area, this massive sell from the daily time frame, but when you look at lower time frames like the 8-hour time frame, the 4-hour time frame, and the hourly time frame, the picture becomes clearer. So at this point there is still a lot that needs to happen before a confirmation in terms of this sells coming to the downside can even be approved for me. So looking at it from the 8-hour time frame, you can tell there's a high, there's a low, high, low, high, low. So this high, you can consider this as a low. So we should expect prices again to move back to 105. So remember, on the daily time frame, we're looking at this reaction at this point and expecting prices to move to 104. This is going to take time. So you move to lower time frames, the 8-hour time frame, and you start putting these pieces together. Higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows. It's not rocket science. There's a trend line that is building at this point. So if the trend line is building at this point, there is this high possibility for prices to come back to this area, just going off of the trend line. And that's one principle. And the second principle for prices to move to 105, it's simple. You have this psychological number right here. So price tends to gravitate towards the psychological number once a reaction happens. So for example, on the 8-hour time frame, we've had prices here. So we had to move to this point. If this area has to hold as a strong area where buyers cannot go past, you should see prices pull back, which it like this is what is happening already. But you should see prices coming back to this side number and then finding it difficult to go past this point. Then you can say the sellers are going to reattempt the sales at this point. So I'll move to lower time frames again, like the 4-hour time frame, so we can put more pieces together. So on the 4-hour time frame again, so coming into next week, this is a piece of price action I'm most concerned with. So the other price, like the other piece of price action, is what we've been looking at during the previous week. So as of now, this is what we have in front of us, and this is what I'm trying to deal with coming into next week. So the picture of the higher highs and the higher lows becomes clearer on the 4-hour time frame. So we've had another higher high and we've had prices coming in, so from the sellers. So now I'm expecting prices to test 105 again, and then the reaction at 105 is going to tell me what is most likely going to happen, say, during the upcoming days. So for example, if we get to 105 and there's an impulsive breach of 105, so let's say we get to 105 and we get a move like this at 105, then I'll be expecting sellers to test 105 and then the move continues to the upside. But what if we get to 105 at this point and it's difficult for prices to go past this point? So we look at this and we have prices finding it difficult and we see something like this, then my bias remains for sells on the DXY. Now these sells might come into an area like this, it might come into an area like this. It's difficult to tell, but if that rejection happens at this point, there is a high possibility for prices to sell, and the area I'll be looking at is 104. How far they decide to take it down, that's none of my business, but that is what I'm looking at coming into next week. So we'll step down again one time frame lower, just to the hourly time frame, to see if we can put another clue again and just have everything together. So on the hourly time frame real quick, now this is even, it looks better on the hourly time frame. You can put a trend line here if you really want to, and I keep telling you, the trend line is just for this visual representation. So if you have your trend line here, these are the principles I'm going off of. First, a psychological number, I'm looking at 105. We've had prices making highs and lows, highs and lows, highs and lows. Price has made a high, now it has made a low, but price is making this low on the hourly time frame, and it's going like it has, there's a violation of this uptrend, so it's telling you something already. So there is this ability, or there's this potential for sellers to come in, and you can tell simply because a reaction at this psychology, at this trend line, gave you new highs. So every time we had price reacting at this point, we had these highs taken to give you new highs. But for some reason, price came at this point and you had to move to the downside. So when you compare this move to the downside on this one, this is massive, and that is why I'm very much interested in this, because it tells you a story already. So there is this potential for sellers to come in. So if sellers are supposed to come in on the DXY, just looking at it now from the hourly time frame, combining this trend line using the psych number, for us to see the sellers coming in, you might see buyers coming in to test this area. Now this confirms everything we've been reading from the daily time frame, the 8-hour time frame, the 4-hour time frame, and so eventually a reaction or a rejection at this point, so, like so, we should see sellers taking prices again to say 104 or to an area like this. It just depends on it. So I'm looking for this possibility for buyers to move prices to 105. Once prices get to 105, I'm expecting sellers to take prices to 104. So this is the move I'm looking at next week. So this is the move I'm looking at for next week. So two simple moves coming into next week: buyers taking prices to 104 to 105, sorry, and then sellers reacting from that point. So we can probably see sales going to like 104, and it just depends. But if we see buyers taking prices to 105 and they breach 105, then my bias is going to change. So now we're having this in mind. Remember I told you we have two pairs I'm looking for buying opportunities and the two pairs I'm looking for selling opportunities. So if this happens where we have these buyers coming in to test 105, that will be the first option for me. If buyers have to test 105, we'll look at other pairs. So let's start real quick. US30. So US30 is I'm very much interested in this pair, and I'm looking for buys on US30, and this is very simple. So we've had prices moving to the upside, and we had this trend line, we had a breach of this trend line, and we had sellers coming in impulsively. So I'm looking at this at this point with sellers coming in impulsively, and right now we're sitting at this point of say 39,000, which is this psychological number right here, and I use the psych numbers again every single time. I use the psych numbers, I use my trend lines. So I'm looking at 39,000, price is reacting at say 39,000. We had massive sales coming in on US30. Now this is important as well, because you go back, look at the previous week's market forecast, and we had this, and it was difficult for me to get in on these sales simply because I didn't have a setup. But we was looking at this last week. We was expecting the DXY. At that point the DXY was around somewhere around here. So the DXY was somewhere around here, and we're expecting these buys to come in so we could take those sales. So go look at the previous week's market focus. So looking at US30 real quick, so this sales came in and the sales were very impulsive, but now I'm so focused at this point, like right here. So if this sales come in impulsively, and we'll sit in at 39,000. If you don't believe these psychological numbers, that's okay, you can use different approaches, but for me the approach I use is a psychological number. That's where I'm very much interested in seeing the price action at this point. So we have massive sales coming in, and we have this difficulty for prices to go to the downside. So you just have sellers here, and there's this consolidation at this point. So if I'm to take say buys on this pair, I need to see a reaction from the buyers at this point, impulsively taking out these highs and say giving me a pullback. If I get something like this, then I'm going to go in for buying opportunities on this pair. So US30 I'm looking for buys. But when you look at the DXY, if the first move that has to come in on the DXY is this move to the upside, then it might be difficult to take those buys on US30, because if the buys are coming on the DXY, then you could see US30 drop further. So it just depends on what is happening, but this is a pair I'll probably be looking for buying opportunities on, depending on what happens as well on the DXY. When you look at NAS100, this is a little bit different to the US30. So on NAS100 I'm looking for a different play. So we've had prices moving to the upside, giving you this pullbacks, higher highs and higher lows. It's the same thing right here, higher highs, higher lows. We had this higher high right here. We had massive sales coming in. Now if this had actually gotten to 19,000, it would have been perfect for me. So if I had this reaction at 19,000, so what we have here, if I had it at 19,000, it would have been perfect, because once price reacts from say that psychological number is really powerful. So we didn't really get prices to this point, but it's fine. I'm still gonna look for selling opportunities. So on the NAS100 I'm looking for selling opportunities. So you've had higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, massive drop to the downside, and all we have now is just a pullback. So while watching this pullback, remember I'm still on the hourly time frame, and I'm not going to go say to other time frames, it's just going to take more time. So while watching this pullback on the hourly time frame, I'm looking at the point where these buyers find it difficult to make moves say to the upside. So once I see this point where the buyers cannot take prices again to the upside, I'll be looking for selling opportunities on NAS100. Now let's look at the S&P500. It's similar to NAS100, but the difference with this is the point where the S&P500 is. So a similar move on the S&P500. If I just do this, so if I zoom out on this, you've had higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows. There's a higher high, and then price just dropped again to the downside. And this is very important, because NAS100 and the S&P500 have a similar move, but if I had to pick one pair to take selling opportunities on, it would be the S&P500. And the reason is simple. When I take buys or sells from a psych number or a psych level, is very, like the outcome is better compared to just taking it within the zone. So looking at this, we've had this massive sales, and then we've had prices testing 5,300. So price is currently sitting at 5,300. So if price finds it difficult, so there's a test. I'm gonna make this bigger real quick. So there's a test of 5300 right now, with the S&P testing 5300. So we had this move and there is this test. So if you see the S&P 500 testing this area and it cannot move to the downside and it stays above this area, then you could expect prices to move to the upside. But if we come into next week, and we see prices doing this, then I'm expecting a test of this and I'm looking for selling opportunities to the downside. So the S&P 500, I'm looking for selling opportunities. NAS100, I'm looking for selling opportunities as well. But let's look at gold, and this is the last pair we're looking at here. So with gold, we had like this nice sell on gold. We took this move to the downside. This was a beautiful sell. So right now, coming into next week, I'm looking for buying opportunities on gold, and this is simple. So we've had prices moving to the upside, making, so there's a high here, there's a low, there's a high, there's a low, high and low. Simple move again, simple. That this is just price action. You have a high, you have a low, then we had this drop to the downside. So looking at this now, we've had this drop to the downside, and I'm looking at this piece of price action right here. So we've had this drop, there's a pullback, and we're expecting prices to move to the downside, like to continue moving to the downside. That is if the sellers are still interested to take prices to the downside. So if I'll be watching this area on gold, and if price finds it difficult to go past this point, that might be an indication for me to say the buyers are ready to take prices again to the upside. You pair this up with, say, what is happening on the DXY, and this is where it gets a little bit complex, because if we get the initial move on the DXY as a buy, then on gold it might be difficult to get those buys in, and we might see sellers coming in again. And at the point where the DXY decides to sell, so let's say it gets to 105 and it decides to sell, then we might see the buyers coming in on gold. So it just depends on what is going to happen. So we might see prices holding at this point, like finding it totally difficult to go past this point, or we might see prices go past this point just a little bit and then it pull back, like this didn't happen, and then you see prices going again to the upside. So I'm watching this closely, and it depends on what is happening on the DXY, depends on what's happening on other pairs. But for the most case, I'm looking for buying opportunities on gold coming into next week. And I'm going to be patient, because you might get sellers coming in again a little bit, but I'm going to be patient because eventually I know these buyers will come in on gold. On US30, I'm looking for buying opportunities as well. On NAS100, I'm looking for selling opportunities. On the S&P 500, I'm looking for selling opportunities. And on the DXY, I'm looking for a possible buy and then a sell. And it just depends on how this decides to play out. So even the sells we're looking at on the DXY, we might have just a move like this and then you get this. So there's no guarantee that price is going to test 105, so it might just come to an area like this and then you get that drop. So that is again is going to give us those buying or selling opportunities on other asset classes. So that's what I'm looking at. So tell me the pairs you're looking at for next week, and if you have a pair you want us to look at during the next week's focus, just drop a comment in the comment section. And if you find this interesting, don't forget, hit that like and subscribe button. See you during the next one. Bye for now.